Arrest the man wanted in the US for the weekend terror attacks. Ahmad Rahami was captured, injured but alive in a police shootout following a huge manhunt.
Counterterrorism and law enforcement professionals at every level are working together around the clock to prevent attacks and to keep us safe.
After two explosions in Manhattan and further devices found in New Jersey, investigators fear he could be part of a terror cell on America's East Coast.
Also tonight, Theresa May arrives in New York with warnings for world leaders about the refugee crisis.
Guilty at last, Christopher Halliwell, convicted of murdering Becky Godden after police blunders helped him evade justice for years.
And brotherly love Brownlee style. Astonishing scenes as Alistair supports Johnny across the finishing line.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale and Mark Austin.
Good evening. The main suspect in Saturday's New York bombings is tonight under arrest after a dramatic shootout with police. Ahmad Khan Rahami is thought to have planted two devices packed with shrapnel in Manhattan, one of which injured 29 people and more in New Jersey, including 5 pipe bombs in a backpack outside a busy station.
A huge manhunt was launched with millions of people in the area sent phone alerts warning them to be on the lookout. Rahami was cornered this afternoon and opened fire on police. 2 were hurt and he was also injured. From New York, our correspondent Robert Moore has the latest.
There you see the suspect right there, apparently conscious.
These were the moments immediately after the frantic manhunt for Ahmad Khan Rahami came to an end. The suspect handcuffed on a stretcher, waiting to be taken to hospital.
There's a guy shooting a gun. Shots fired. Shots fired.
It followed a dramatic shootout with police, captured by this passing motorist. An image from a few minutes later shows Rahami on the ground, his shirt pulled up amid fears he was wearing a suicide vest.
Hey, everybody get off of the street! Get off the street! Let's go! Get off the street!
Rahami is linked by fingerprints and surveillance footage to the pressure cooker bombs that were planted in New York and New Jersey over the weekend. The one that did the most damage detonated on Saturday night in Chelsea, a fashionable neighborhood in New York. Early this morning in the town of Elizabeth in New Jersey, 5 more improvised devices were discovered in a backpack. As one was being handled by a robot, there was an accidental detonation. The president has praised the quick reaction of police.
I want to take this opportunity to reassure the people in this city, this region, and Americans across our country that our counterterrorism and law enforcement professionals at every level, federal, state, and local, are working together around the clock to prevent attacks and to keep us safe.
The first device was targeting a charity race in Seaside Park in New Jersey. It exploded but caused no injuries. That same evening, 80 miles away at 8:30, there was the blast in Manhattan. A sweep of the area discovered another bomb 4 blocks away. Then, in the early hours of this morning, the additional devices were found at the train station in Elizabeth. New York remains a city in a state of heightened security. This is the week of the UN General Assembly, with over 100 heads of state staying in Manhattan. The question tonight is whether Rahami was a lone wolf or part of a broader terrorist cell.
Well, Robert joins us now from Manhattan with the latest. Robert, what can you tell us about this suspect that they've captured?
Well, we know a little about him, but there's also plenty we don't. Ahmad Khan Rahami was born in Afghanistan. He moved to the United States, became a naturalized US citizen, and his family run a not very reputable fast food restaurant in the town of Elizabeth in New Jersey, about 17 miles to the southwest of New York. What we absolutely do not know is what ideology he might have adhered to, whether he was a so-called soldier of the Islamic State or possibly of Al-Qaeda. And we don't know whether he was taking orders from overseas or whether he was self-radicalized. But perhaps the other point that observers and analysts are making is that luckily he was not a very skilled operative. I mean, these were crude devices. They were placed in odd locations. Two were actually stumbled upon by would-be thieves. And in the end, he was found fast asleep in the corridor of a bar in his hometown before that fateful shootout, which led to his capture and, of course, his wounding.
OK, Robert Moore in New York, thank you.
Well, as Robert was saying, even before the bombings, New York was a city on high alert as world leaders arrive for the UN General Assembly. It's Theresa May's first summit as Prime Minister, but the main topic for discussion is something she's all too familiar with, the refugee crisis.
And Mrs May's views on that are likely to put her at odds with many world leaders, as Paul Davis reports.
A watershed meeting, the UN is calling it. But Theresa May's warm greeting for the Secretary-General was followed by a clear statement that Britain's borders cannot be open to everyone who wants to come here.
There is nothing wrong with the desire to migrate for a better life. But the uncontrolled migration we see today is not in the interests of migrants who are exposed to danger, not in the interests of the countries they are leaving, travelling through or seeking to reach.
How to persuade desperate people they should stop risking their lives to reach these Greek beaches is the world's challenge now. Maher Rashid and his family, originally from the Syrian capital Damascus, survived the crossing from Turkey, but only just.
We had a bad luck with the sea. It was very angry.
Despite the risk to his daughter Lulu, he says he'd do it again because her only hope for the future is away from Syria and the refugee camps.
I want her to raise in peaceful environment, peaceful life. Yes. I want her to be a doctor.
As a stark reminder of the many who do not make it, a graveyard made up of thousands of life jackets was laid out outside Parliament to coincide with the UN summit.
Each of these jackets was worn by an adult or a child who crossed those treacherous waters from Turkey to the Greek islands, a journey that's already believed to have claimed 4,000 lives, and the drownings continue on a daily basis. Campaigners are hoping this powerful image will concentrate the minds of world leaders as they gather in New York today.
It's a huge moment in history. It will pass, hopefully, but right now we need to behave slightly more responsibly and humanely than we are, and we have a proud tradition of doing that in this country.
Britain's response so far concentrated on providing aid to the displaced who remain in their refugee camps will be at odds with others around the UN table. Paul Davis, ITV News.
Well, our Deputy Political Editor Chris Shipp joins us from outside the United Nations in New York. And Chris, Theresa May then appearing to hold firm on Britain's stance on refugees. How will this go down with other world leaders?
Well, Mark, I've just come from interviewing David Miliband. You remember the former Labour Foreign Secretary who's now based here in New York running the International Rescue Committee for Refugees. He says the view here at the UN is, where is Britain? We know you're leaving the European Union. We know Brexit is happening. But on the big issues of the day, we don't know where Britain stands. We don't know where Theresa May stands. And the issues don't come much bigger than the issue of mass migration. Now, to be fair to Theresa May, she's only just got here. She's got her big speech to the UN General Assembly, her first as Prime Minister tomorrow. But on the plane on the way out here, Mark, she gave us no indication that she thinks the answer to mass migration is for Britain to offer to resettle more refugees. We're currently committed to 20,000 refugees from the region around Syria, plus 3,000 unaccompanied children. But she says she thinks the money should be spent in the region, not resettling them in the UK. And on that area of policy, at least, she doesn't differ from David Cameron one bit.
All right, Chris, thank you very much indeed.
Here, justice has finally caught up with convicted murderer Christopher Halliwell after a jury found him guilty of murdering a second woman. He took detectives to the spot where he'd buried the body of 20-year-old Becky Godden 5 years ago.
But Halliwell escaped punishment because of a police blunder. Today, he was finally convicted, with Becky's family saying their long and painful journey is now at an end, as Rupert Evelyn reports.
He laughed as he was found guilty. Christopher Halliwell's second murder conviction, in all likelihood as he recognises he will now die in prison.
If it goes to court and I'm found guilty, that's it. They lock me up and throw away the key.
There was little doubt that Becky Godden was killed by Halliwell and buried in a shallow grave in Gloucestershire. He admitted to it, but feebly denied it during the trial, an action that only delayed justice for his victim and her family.
We have waited over 5 years for this momentous day. It has been an extremely painful journey, but today we've received the justice that has felt like an eternity coming for our beautiful little girl, Becky.
Halliwell claimed his confession to Becky's murder was given under duress, but he made it at a site he'd also led police to, the place he dumped his other murder victim, Sian O'Callaghan. Former detective Stephen Fulcher took Halliwell's confession, but in the hope of finding Sian O'Callaghan alive, he'd broken police arrest guidelines. It took 5 years to untangle and jeopardise the case, but his former colleagues understand why he did it.
Do you have some sympathy with what Detective Superintendent Fulcher has been through?
Absolutely. I mean, they're very difficult circumstances that he faced. A live investigation, he wasn't aware whether Sian was alive or dead. He made a very difficult decision. It's not really for me to comment on whether he made the right decision, but hopefully there's some vindication today for the families.
Halliwell made unsubstantiated claims that unnamed drug dealers were responsible. It was just another lie. And 13 years after she was last seen alive, a jury agreed the truth, that Becky Godden was murdered by a man who would go on to kill again. Christopher Halliwell's 2 murder convictions happened 8 years apart, and Wiltshire police believe that it's entirely conceivable that he may well have killed again. There's no evidence for it at the moment, but they are certainly not ruling it out. As for Halliwell, he will come back here to Bristol Crown Court on Friday to be sentenced. A life sentence is mandatory, but the judge has indicated that he is thinking about delivering Halliwell a whole life term.
Rupert Evelyn in Bristol, thank you.
It's been revealed today that the RAF was involved in coalition airstrikes that killed dozens of Syrian government troops at the weekend. The Ministry of Defence says an unmanned Reaper drone fired a missile during an operation with US forces. The Syrians said this evening that a fragile 7-day ceasefire was now over, blaming what they called terrorist groups. Our international affairs editor Raghi Omar has the latest.
This was the moment dozens of Syrian soldiers were killed at the weekend in an airstrike that involved a UK drone, which the MOD now admits fired a missile during the fatal bombing. Coalition forces thought they were striking ISIS militants but got it wrong. It was the first time the US-led coalition has hit Syrian government soldiers loyal to President Assad. Washington apologized, but President Assad today said the incident was a flagrant aggression. The MOD said, "We can confirm that the UK participated in the recent coalition airstrike in Syria, south of Deir ez-Zor on Saturday, and we are fully cooperating with the coalition investigation. The UK would not intentionally target Syrian military units." This is the kind of RAF Reaper drone that took part in the attack, armed with 500-pound bombs and piloted remotely, either from the UK or from a base in the Middle East.
This incident is a significant failure of something. Either the intelligence was very bad, or in this case it seems that during the operation targeting failed.
It comes as Syria's fragile week-long ceasefire appears to be over, with the Syrian government saying it wouldn't extend the truce because what it describes as terrorist rebel groups had not honoured it. Raghi Omar, ITV News.
Vladimir Putin has further tightened his grip on Russian politics with his party's landslide victory in parliamentary elections. With most of the votes now counted, the United Russia Party is on track to win 76% of the seats, increasing the likelihood of Mr. Putin running for a 4th term as president.
Here, junior doctors have started a High Court challenge to controversial government plans to impose new employment contracts in England. A group called Justice for Health claims the new working practices are unsafe. Well, our health editor Rachel Younger is here. So what bearing, if any, will this have on doctors' plans for more strikes?
Well, it could have a bearing if the junior doctors win. And to do that, they need to prove that the Health Secretary was acting beyond his powers by choosing to force new terms and conditions on them. But the timing on this is very tight. The judgment will come on the 28th of September. That is exactly 1 week before the first of these 5-day strikes. And just as hospitals will be beginning the process of getting in touch with patients to tell them that their operations and procedures are being cancelled, we also, of course, don't know how binding this judgment will be, whether the Health Secretary would choose to appeal, although if he loses, it will be very difficult for him, I think, to carry on regardless. It's worth saying that what may also have a bearing on these strikes is a meeting that will happen this weekend at the British Medical Association. Junior doctors gathering there because there is mounting evidence that more and more of them are beginning to feel uncomfortable about how long this first strike is, 3 days longer than on any previous occasion. And it may be that sense of duty more than anything else that dictates what happens next.
OK, Rachel, thank you.
Still to come, online and on the road, calls to ban in-car touchscreens that allow drivers check-in at the wheel.
And brothers in arms, how Johnny Brownlee needed a helping hand to make the finishing line.
But first, the Paralympics came to a spectacular close in Rio last night after 11 days of sport and record-breaking British success. The GB team finished the Games in second place. The final haul was 64 golds and a total of 147 medals, far exceeding the pre-Games target of 121. And as Richard Pallo reports from Rio, the question now is whether they'll repeat that or even better it in Tokyo.
For 11 days, red, white and blue bled gold, silver and bronze. The best funded team ever, producing their most impressive results yet. Nearly half the squad return with a medal. The efforts of London 2012 paling into comparison. The benchmark for future Paralympians will now be the heights that they soared to in Brazil.
I think we will be in people's minds for a long, long time, and it's hard sometimes to emulate the success that we had at home games, and Team GB did really well and Paralympics GB did really well, so I think other countries are going to start being scared of us.
In Rio, a piece of British sporting history.
They surely already are, setting world records galore and in the table second only to China, whose disability population is the same as the entire UK's.
A brilliant run from Peacock.
As well as talent and hard work, the other main ingredient remains funding, £73 million of it over the 4-year cycle. That is not guaranteed to increase. And with Russia's return next time, British officials admit 2016 could prove difficult to surpass.
119 medalists in total. That's a phenomenal team performance. And yes, of course, that will be incredibly difficult to replicate. But, you know, Tokyo's a new games. We'll be refreshing ourselves post-Rio.
The record breaker, the history maker.
Talent identification for 2020 has already begun, actively trying to unearth others like Kadina Cox, diagnosed with multiple sclerosis just 2 years ago and now a record breaker. As for the end of games photo with the medalists, well, they only had space for the golden ones, an indication of the scale of achievement.
A little bit embarrassing at times. They just kept coming in as if you could go and pick them up at Sainsbury's, you know, but it was amazing. And I think that shows this investment in sport that the people of Britain have made.
Also exceeding expectations, the event itself. In the run-up, the city was out of money, the Paralympics supposedly in crisis. But the clouds lifted and Rio salvaged a Games to remember.
Richard Pallo reporting there.
Well, full-time Olympic champion Mo Farah is among 8 Team GB gold medalists to have their medical data published online by hackers. The records show which banned substances they've been allowed to take due to a legitimate medical need.
And the former England footballer Paul Gascoigne has pleaded guilty to making a racist comment during an event in Wolverhampton. Magistrates heard he singled out and humiliated a black security guard. He was fined £1,000 and ordered to pay another £1,000 in compensation.
Now, a road safety charity is warning that new touchscreen technology in cars is a potential death trap. Increasing number of vehicles allow motorists to access apps like Facebook and Twitter on dashboards as they drive.
But campaigners say they are an enormous distraction to drivers and they want them banned. Sally Lockwood reports.
Can you be hands-on and hands-free?
Using your mobile phone in the car has been illegal for years, but new technology means car dashboards now carry many similar features. Distractions campaigners are calling death traps.
We all know how many crashes are caused by distracted drivers, and this is just too much of a temptation. The implication is that you can use the apps from your phone in the car safely. You can't.
The Institute for Advanced Motorists says that if a driver is travelling at 30 miles an hour and takes their eye off the road to glance at a touchscreen for as little as 2.5 seconds, they will find they've travelled about 30 yards without looking where they're going.
To navigate your way around them.
Driving safety expert Kevin Delaney took me out on the road so he could demonstrate how even basic features are now more dangerous with touchscreens.
The difficulty with the touchscreens, you actually have to take your eyes off the road. So for example, radio. Even before I've scrolled up or down, I've had my eyes off the road and on this for about 3 seconds. If somebody steps into the road 70 feet ahead of you, you're probably not even going to see them, let alone stop.
Many new cars now have touchscreens with access to the internet and even social media. But car makers insist the displays are safe.
Any new technology that goes into a vehicle is extensively tested by manufacturers who spend billions of pounds worth of investing ensuring they are safe to use and involve minimum driver distraction.
Part of your in-car experience. Using a touchscreen while driving isn't illegal in the way it would be if you were texting on a mobile phone. But as this technology advances, it seems there's a growing number of features that could take your eyes off the road. Sally Lockwood, ITV News.
And finally tonight, can there be a more inspirational story in sport than this touching tale of brotherly love? Britain's Johnny Brownlee was leading his triathlon in Mexico until the searing heat brought him close to collapse.
Yes, Johnny's knees buckled and he looked certain to drop until, that is, big brother Alistair stepped in and sacrificed his own race to help Johnny over the line. Damon Green explains.
And right now he seems to have lost control of his legs.
Just a few hundred metres from the finish line and with the world title in his grasp, but suddenly Johnny Brownlee's legs start to wobble and in the Mexican heat his body simply comes to a halt.
This is a horrible sight. Jonathan Brownlee
overtaken for first place, on the verge of giving up, and then his older brother Alistair comes to the rescue.
Dramatic scenes in Cozumel.
Helping him limp to the finish line. Those who've known them since they were boys say they would expect nothing less.
I was thinking, he can't just drop him and leave him behind now. He's done the hard bit, he's got to take him with him. But I think you could just tell he was talking to him all the way around. He was really shouting at him, come on, come on, come on, you've got to go, keep going, keep going.
Johnny and Alistair Brownlee crossed the line together in Rio to take Olympic gold and silver, and all their lives they've trained together, competed together and pushed each other, this time all the way to the end.
And Alistair is having to drag him across the line and pushing him home for second.
But it wasn't just about finishing the race, says one training partner, it was about getting help.
Alistair was trying to get him to the finish line so that all the medical support was there that you need when you get into such a pickle like that. They'll have ice packs right there, IV drips, the ambulance can wheel him straight away. So, Alistair just wanted to get him to the finish line so that all that medical treatment was there.
To be honest, I wish the flipping idiot had just paced it right and crossed the finish line first. So, yeah, very nice, but yeah, he'd won it easy. He could have jogged that last 2K and won the race.
Johnny later posted a picture of himself recovering in hospital. He owes this one to his brother, Damon Green. ITV News.
That's what brothers are for.
Amazing story.
That's it. Tom Bradby's here at 10.
All of us here, though, have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.